Good morning, all of you. Any doubt on yesterday's test? First, we'll see that, and then second question. Okay, convertibility. Okay. So today we'll discuss that convertibility. Aviral, good morning. Apart from that, any topic which we have covered and masala bond. Masala bond once asked in 2016. Masala bond is something which generally those companies or MNCs they issue outside of your country to raise fund, like kind of bond on which those investors invest and those fund will come to the companies. Masala bond. Similarly, China also issue kind of Momo bond or something. Okay. Question number 6. Question is, any investment by a non-resident Indian will be counted as FDI. And second statement is, any foreign investment in an unlisted company will be considered as FDI. NRI, see, the statement is any investment by a NRI will be counted as FDI. NRI can invest in stock market as well. So it's not that NRI only when NRI invest in your country that will be considered as FDI. It's not like that. FDI has different what we call meaning. Okay. So do you have idea this? What is this listed company and unlisted company? Listed means this company has already been listed in the stock market. Unlisted means it has not been listed. Okay. That is the difference. It's about the trend. Annual current account balance of India has always been in deficit in last 5 years. Generally, it's not that, always means you are in that negative zone. तो कभी ऐसा भी हुआ होगा that current account surplus भी हुई होगी for a very short period of time. That could be a possibility. Sorry? Net FDI means FDI going outside and FDI coming inside. The difference. I mean, your people also investing in other countries, and your country is also getting investment. That is the net. Sorry? Annual net FDI inflow in India has always been positive in last 5 years. You just see the data, what exactly the trend of last 5 years. Okay. You just check it in Google, what exactly the trend of last 5 years of this net FDI inflow. Okay. Any other question? Okay. So let's begin with today's discussion. Yesterday we started this external sector and we completed those types of exchange rate. Okay. So today we'll begin this those types of exchange rate. We'll see a bit comparison between what? Fixed exchange rate and flexible. Fixed and flexible. So let's see what happens in case of fixed exchange rate and then flexible exchange rate. Okay. So let's begin with this fixed one. In case of fixed exchange rate, what we have seen that government intervenes in the exchange market to regulate the exchange rate. Number one. Number two, when government intervenes, that means government has to maintain a large foreign exchange reserve. Yes or no? So government has to maintain large foreign exchange reserve. Government has to maintain a large foreign exchange reserve. This is number one. Number two, when we say government intervenes, that means if there is any instability in the economy with respect to foreign exchange, then government has control over that. Yes or no? So we can say that the control over the exchange rate fluctuations and all. So there should not be any extremes in case of fixed exchange rate, because you have the control, and whenever there is unnecessary fluctuations, government can intervene. And how government intervenes to manage this, we have already explained that. Okay. Suppose in case of fixed exchange rate, government is intervening, okay, and there is a case that supply of dollar has increased in your economy, so your currency is depreciating and dollar is appreciating, but you want the reverse situation. So what the government has to do? Absorb this extra additional supply of dollar. When government absorbs this extra additional supply of dollar against Indian rupee, that means it supplies Indian rupee into the economy. Again, that creates what? Inflation. So one way the government is trying to balance this exchange rate, the other way government has to manage the inflation as well. So your monetary policy depends on what? Your exchange rate policy. Yes or no? So your monetary policy depends on the exchange rate policy. That means you lose the sovereignty over the independent monetary policy. So government lose the sovereignty over independent monetary policy. I mean, you can't take decision regarding monetary policy without considering the exchange rate policy. That is the main problem with the fixed exchange rate. Okay, coming to this flexible part. Here we have seen government does not intervene in the exchange rate market. So government does not have to maintain this foreign exchange reserve or large foreign exchange reserve. Anyway, you have to maintain foreign exchange reserve for your export and import, but like fixed exchange rate, government does not have to maintain the large foreign exchange reserve to manage the exchange rate. Number one. Number two, it is determined by the market forces. That means you do not have any control over that. That means what? If any kind of fluctuations arises in the exchange rate, then you do not have any control. It is, I mean, both the cases, one merit is what? It can be automatically adjusted. Second, if unnecessary fluctuates, then you can't control that in case of flexible exchange rate. Okay, so you can write it has the automatic adjustment capacity, which has this or with the help of market forces. At the same time, you can't control this unnecessary fluctuations. You can't control this unnecessary fluctuations. Okay. Here we have seen government loses sovereignty over independent monetary policy. But here is what? You have this independent monetary policy or capacity to execute independent monetary policy. Okay. So you can write independent monetary policy. Clear? Now, coming to all the points are clear or any doubt on this point? How this year government loses independent monetary policy and how government is capable to execute independent monetary policy? I think this is understood. Yes or no? So coming to the next. In the fixed exchange rate or in the third one, managed floating exchange rate, which India follows, what happens when there is excessive supply of foreign currencies in your economy? RBI intervenes to absorb excess dollar. That means when they absorb excess dollar, against that they supply Indian rupee. So Indian rupee, when the supply of Indian rupee increases, it leads to what? Inflation. Now challenge is to control this. How RBI controls this inflation? Let's see. Okay. How RBI controls this inflation? RBI can increase the rate of interest on the reverse repo rate. Reverse repo rate. What is this reverse repo rate? RBI borrows money from the commercial banks. So if through this window of reverse repo rate, RBI borrows money from the commercial banks so that money supply can be decreased in the economy. Money supply can be decreased in the economy, through which inflation can be controlled. This process is known as what? Sterilization. This process is known as what? Sterilization. So if any this term is asked by UPSC in your prelims, then Gurbir, actually portal has been made for every individual. First thing. Second thing, in portal every individual is getting their test and your material. It's very difficult to post every day on the group of this PDF and all. If you want, we can send you like personally, but if you access your portal, then you get your test. Now, what is the purpose to share it in the group? I can't understand. If you want, we can send you personally. Okay. So please focus in the class. We'll have a word after the class. Okay. We'll listen you or your like queries and all. Don't worry. So this is what? Sterilization. That means the instrument through which we control the, or RBI controls the money supply in the economy. और वो money supply कैसे बढ़ती है? Through this absorption of extra additional dollar. Okay, and against that RBI supplies Indian rupee or Indian or domestic currency through which money supply increases. Clear? This is known as sterilization. Under this sterilization, let me tell you one thing. Suppose there is a possibility RBI does not have adequate reserve of Indian rupee. RBI does not have adequate reserve of Indian rupee to supply against that extra additional absorption of dollar. Then what RBI does, or what is that possibility RBI can do? Print money. Have you heard this term, deficit financing? What happens under that?
Government's expenditure exceeds its revenue.
Mm-hmm.
The government can ask RBI to print money against government's activities.
Deficit financing means
Finance
when
its deficit.
government finance its deficit through printing of new money, new currency. Okay, same thing happens here also. Sometimes RBI does not have adequate reserve of Indian rupee. So what it does, it simply prints money or prints currency and supply it into the economy, which creates inflation. Okay. Clear? Now, have you uh, have you read this? What is the impact of devaluation and revaluation? So let's discuss impact of devaluation and revaluation, because from this area questions are being asked regularly. So let's discuss that. First, let's see the merit part. The benefit a country gets from devaluation. I mean, alternatively, we are using this term devaluation or depreciation and revaluation and appreciation. Okay, so let's begin with the devaluation. What would be the merit? Devaluation means what? It increases export. So you can say that suppose China is deliberately devaluing its currency, that means it wants to increase export to capture the market, to earn more foreign currencies. Okay, this is number one. Number two, if this export is increasing, can we say that it helps in improvement of current account deficit? How? What is this current account deficit? Import is greater than export. So when your export increases, you earn more foreign currencies which will come to your country so that you can finance your import bill or increased import bill. That's why the current account deficit improves. When export increases, it also leads to what? Increase in economic growth. How? See, here we are assuming that through this devaluation process, your export is increasing. If you see the practical world, there is a possibility even if you devalued your currency, your export is not increasing. Why? Because in global economy, there is a recession. They are not demanding your goods and services. First thing. Second thing, there could be a possibility your goods are not up to that quality which these foreigners or these other developed countries they prefer your goods. over others. So we are simply assuming that other things remaining constant, when we are devaluing our domestic currency, it increases export. Okay. So when export increases, economic growth also increases. That means more demand for your goods and services increases, production will be at a higher side, employment would be at a higher side, your production capacity will increase, that will lead to economic growth. Clear? Now coming to the demerit part. Demerit. What happens? First demerit. When export increases, import will be expensive or costlier. First. Second, can we say devaluation may cause inflationary situation in the economy?
Yes, yes,
How?
because RBI will absorb the dollar by increasing the rate.
See, when your import is costlier and you are importing essential items like Sri Lanka, like Bangladesh, like Nepal, then obviously your country will suffer from, or you will see a rise in price level in your economy. So may cause inflationary situation, because for the same basket of goods you have to pay more. Let me give you another example. Suppose industries in your country are operating on the imported raw materials, and when you purchase raw materials at a higher rate, obviously the cost of production will increase and it will lead to inflationary situation. Okay. What are other demerits? Import become costlier. You saw the inflation in your economy. Suppose those people or citizen of your country, they are staying abroad, their cost of living would increase. It means when your parents are sending money to your sibling who is studying abroad, then you have to pay more for the same amount, or if you send the same amount, he or she will get the lesser amount. Okay, so reduces the purchasing power of citizens abroad. So this is one another, uh, you may call it demerit. Next demerit, can we say can we say rapid devaluation, if RBI or any central bank is not controlling that, like to manage the exchange rate, and the currency is devaluing rapidly or depreciating rapidly, let's say, can we say it leads to risk of capital flight? What is this meaning of capital flight? That means capital is going outside, or withdrawal of investment. Why? Rapid devaluation or rapid depreciation means your currency is in crisis. Your it's a sign of weaker economy. That's why investor will definitely in that negative sentiment, they will simply withdraw their investment, and they pull out their money and they will find the alternative to invest their capital. So it can trigger the risk of capital flight. Okay. Next is reevaluation, or simply you can call it appreciation. One merit, one demerit of revaluation. मेरिट क्या हो सकता है? इम्पैक्ट ऑन एक्सपोर्ट एंड इंपोर्ट बताइए.
Sir, import increases, export decreases.
Import becomes cheaper
cheaper.
and export decreases, demerit. Similarly, you can find more merit and demerits on yourself if you analyze this thing. Okay. Now, so next is measures to control excessive depreciation of domestic currency, and we are discussing about India or India's case. Since Indian currency was depreciating, and there could be a possibility they ask this question: if you would become the finance minister of the country, then what are those measures you will take to make your currency stronger than the foreign currency? So steps you must take in against the excessive depreciation of domestic currency. Okay. Number one, see, the fundamental mechanism is what? Demand for foreign currency is increasing, so the price of foreign currency is increasing, so foreign currency is appreciating against the domestic currency. Clear? So our job is to control that extra additional demand for foreign currency. Then only we can control the depreciation of domestic currency. Okay. So how we can do that?
Reduce the import.
Reduce the imports.
Increase the imports.
Increase the imports. Okay, we'll come to that later. Suppose, how to control that extra additional demand? RBI has to meet that extra demand. Yesterday also we have discussed what RBI can do.
Supply foreign currency.
When supply of foreign currency increases, it absorbs. When there is need of more foreign currency, it meets that demand, extra demand. So first step is you can intervene, or currency market intervention. Currency market intervention. So RBI will sell more dollar by absorbing Indian rupee. Two cases we discussed yesterday. The first one is extra supply, और वो जो नीचे वाला था वो एक्स्ट्रा डिमांड वाला था. सो दैट एक्स्ट्रा डिमांड मेजर वी हैव टू टेक, और RBI हैज टू टेक. This is number one. Number two, you have to control that extra demand. The second measure could be, if you increase the repo rate. What is this repo rate? The rate at which commercial borrows money from the RBI against government securities. If you increase the rate of return on the government securities, then investment will increase to your economy. That means more Indian rupee will be demanded against the dollar or foreign currencies. When investment is going to US, then demand for dollar is increasing. When investment will come to your country, then demand for Indian rupee will increase. Then you can control the this excessive depreciation. Okay, so repo rate hike, exactly this thing has been executed by US Federal Reserve. They did the same thing. Simply they increase the rate of return on the government securities. So since it's getting higher return, more investors started investing in the US. So demand for dollar increased in the economy. So dollar started appreciating and Indian rupee started depreciating. So that reverse we have to do. So repo rate hike is another step. So first one is currency market intervention. That means through what? You have to meet that or sell the dollar. Okay? Sell the dollar. And second is repo rate hike. And the third one is yesterday I have told you that remittances. And India is the highest recipient of remittances. Okay. So when India is receiving remittances, that means demand for Indian rupee is increasing. But when remittances are going outside or outward remittances, demand for foreign currency is increasing. So if we can control that outward remittances, then obviously we can control the depreciation of Indian rupee. When remittances is coming to your country, that means the people are staying abroad, outside, they are demanding more of Indian rupee. But when you are sending money, you need what? Foreign currency. That if you want to control this outward remittances, obviously this depreciation would be controlled. So regulation over the outward remittances. Sorry? You can put cap, limit. Tariff. Tariff. No, tariff are something which we impose on the this goods and services. Remittances simply means the currency inflow or outflow of those currencies. Fourth, fourth is suppose to increase the inflow of investment or increase the inflow of capital, RBI issued some specific bond. Any kind of bond, it could be NRI bond to attract investment in our economy so that Indian rupee demand will increase in the economy and Indian rupee will appreciate. Indian rupee will appreciate. Okay, so any kind of bond can be issued to attract the investor or to inflow or to attract investment in your economy so that the excessive demand for foreign currency could be minimized or demand for domestic currency will increase and we can manage the excessive depreciation. Okay, so these are the four steps which primarily RBI exercises during the time of this excessive depreciation of Indian rupee. We'll come to that, just wait. See, the tariff is something which we impose on the goods and services, either export or import. We'll come to that, we'll discuss that as well. That is the secondary. That is something which generally government uses at the time of current account deficit.
सर जैसे आरबीआई ने जैसे इम्पोर्ट्स जो है गोल्ड का जब बढ़ रहा था तो आरबीआई ने फिर गोल्ड के अगेंस्ट में भी बॉन्ड्स इशू किए थे कुछ तो वो भी तो एक तरीके से इम्पोर्ट को कंट्रोल
See,
करना ही
like gold import is increasing. Okay, so that leads to current account deficit. Okay, current account deficit, if you want to control that, then if India is importing something non-essential, let's say gold is non-essential item, then you can simply put a cap or limit, or you can impose tariff as well. Like petroleum products, these are essential to run the economy, to run the industries. Petroleum, natural gas, these are essential items. You can't put tariff on that to increase the rate and all. I mean, you can put any kind of restriction which discourages those import. You need this import of those petroleum and natural gas. Yesterday I gave you that example of Nepal. They put restriction on the non-essential items like bike to rectify this balance of payment deficit or current account deficit. Okay, so these are the measures. If rupee is depreciating, you can do that. Okay, we'll come to those import and export tariff. When country suffers from current account deficit for a longer period of time, then what should be the measures? We'll come to that. Okay. So next is current account deficit, its impact, and how we can, or what are those measures to be taken to improve the current account deficit. See, I mean, you must have heard this that India and Russia is planning to have the trade relation with their own currencies, ruble and Indian rupee. But when US put sanction on Iran, then also India and Iran decided to have trade in their own currency. So these are like exceptions, and I mean, still not that kind of atmosphere have been developed that people or these countries will have trade in their own currencies. Majority, I mean, this is something like India, Iran, India, Russia, this is 1% of your trade. So these are measures you can take. Like when you will have trade with Russia with respect to your domestic currency, obviously demand for dollar will come down. Yes or no? To if you want to manage this excessive depreciation of Indian rupee against dollar. But this is not like primary measures or prime measures which RBI wants to take to control the depreciation. Okay, because this is something 1% or rare circumstances. Since US put sanction on Russia, US put sanction on Ukraine, US put sanction on Iran. Okay, then India decided, because India needs to import that petroleum and natural gas. But this is something 1% of your whole trade. You can't rely only on those options. You can take such measures to control your depreciation of Indian currency, but primarily these are the measures which RBI does take during this excessive depreciation of domestic currency. Okay. Now come to this CAD and its impact. What is CAD or current account deficit? It's a very common term you must have seen in the news. Simply I have told you that import of goods and services is greater than export. That means you are paying more than you are earning, okay, in terms of foreign currencies. Now let's see what are those impact of this current account deficit. Impact of current account deficit. See, balance of payment has two accounts, I have already told you, current and capital. We are discussing that this account is in deficit. Clear? Suppose your capital account is in surplus, adequate amount of investment is coming, assistance is coming, borrowing also is coming. So your capital account is in surplus. That means foreign currencies are coming to your country through capital account. That means your country is getting adequate amount of foreign currencies. Then you can simply use that surplus amount in the capital account to finance this deficit in the current account. This account is in deficit. Your import is higher than the export, but still you are getting through this channel. Then you can mobilize this extra or surplus amount to this. But sometimes this is in deficit. Then what to do? Okay. Then the next option is what? Borrowings. You have to borrow money and you do not have that adequate amount of foreign exchange reserve with your central bank. That also have been exhausted, because whatever amount was there, you simply use that to finance your import, because you have to feed your people for the essential items, what Sri Lanka was doing. So when that is also in deficit, then you have to borrow, and borrowing is something is not sustainable for a longer period of time, because again for the borrowing as well you have to pay what? Interest. Okay, again you have to pay the interest. So first point you can say that this is unsustainable in nature if current account deficit is financed through borrowing, because for that borrowing as well you have to pay the interest. Okay. Second is the continuous current account deficit cause a loss of confidence of the foreign investors, cause a loss of confidence by the foreign investors. So they simply remove or withdraw their investment from your country. They will find alternative investment which is more profitable, which is more stable than your economy. Okay, so your country or your economy become less competitive than other countries. Okay. Generally what happens when current account deficit is in your economy, government tries to further devalue the currency so that you can increase the export and you can earn some foreign exchange and you can finance the import bill. But your devaluation something did not work in your favor because suppose like Sri Lanka was importing the essential items. Okay, further it aggravated the current account deficit rather than improving the current account deficit. What Sri Lanka did, current account deficit was there. They started depreciating their own currency to increase export so that they can earn foreign currency and they can finance the import bill. Okay, since they were importing this essential items, this further depreciation leads to what? Your import becomes costlier. Further depreciation led to your import become costlier, which was again was not sustainable. Further aggravated that current account deficit. Okay, so this is the, I mean, it depends on the nature of economy. Suppose if that would happen with the China could have managed with the further depreciation or devaluation, because China is not importing those essential items. It will improve that current account deficit. But since Sri Lanka was importing those essential items, okay, even if current account deficit was there, they started further devaluing their own currency. Devaluation means what? To increase export. Import will become costlier. So they could not manage with that improved export, but they had to pay higher amount for the same goods, same basket of goods and services. So further it aggravated the current account deficit. Okay, that means their country suffered from what? Inflationary situation or hyperinflation. So that's why you must have heard this news that the packet of this milk powder in Sri Lanka, the price was around 400 rupees, 500 rupees, which was generally 70 to 80 rupees. It was around 400 to 500 rupees. That's why this inflationary situation arises. Because they were simply importing essential items, they were simply importing those raw materials for their industries. That means they were suffering from the imported inflation. Okay. Now, next is how we can improve this. Okay. The first step, obviously, the devaluation of domestic currency. Devaluation of domestic currency so that export increases and the country will earn more foreign currency and they can finance the import bill. Second, lesser dependency on the import, or if you can say in India's policy, or if you see the India's policy during the COVID time, it's a kind of self-reliance or Atmanirbhar. That means India wanted to reduce the dependency on those import goods. That means import substitution. The country wants to produce those goods and services which they were importing earlier. Import substitution. Third is tight monetary and fiscal policy. That means simply the government wants to reduce the aggregate demand of the economy so that import could be minimized or import could be reduced. That is why tight monetary and fiscal policy. See, suppose this case is happening with India and India adopted this tight monetary and fiscal policy. So under the tight monetary policy, what happens? This repo rate increased. When repo rate increased, that means government securities are giving higher amount of return. Then investment will come to your country. So when investment will come to your country, demand for Indian rupee will increase. Price of Indian rupee will increase, Indian rupee will appreciate. Yes or no? That means again your import will become cheaper and export will be dearer or expensive. बट आप क्या ट्राई कर रहे थे पहले? इंपोर्ट को कम करना था, बट ड्यू टू दिस इंपोर्ट इज बिकमिंग अगेन cheaper. So this is what a policy dilemma which arises in front of RBI. So at the time of tight monetary policy, let me explain this again. At the time of tight monetary policy, why tight monetary policy? To reduce the consumption pattern, reduce the purchasing power of individuals so that import will come down. So what you did, you increased this repo rate, that means the rate of return on the government securities. When you increase the repo rate, the government securities, then it attracts more investment in your economy. More investment is coming to your economy. But when more investment is coming to your economy, it's good for if our currency was depreciating earlier. So your currency will start appreciating. But at the same time, your import is become cheap in comparison to the previous one. So again, you have to manage this thing. Okay. So there could be a possibility it will further worsen the current account deficit rather than improving the current account deficit. Okay. And the last measure would be your protectionism. What is this protectionism? Restriction on the export and import, like import tariff, quota on import. Okay. So we will discuss in detail this tariff policy and all. So for the timing, just write protectionism and all. Okay. Now next is, last year prelims, this question was there, near and rear. Yes and no. So what are those near and rear? Anyone? What are those rear and near? One is nominal effective exchange rate, another one is real effective exchange rate. Then what is the difference or what are they? You can say both are indicators of external competitiveness. External competitiveness means competitiveness with respect to trade with other countries. For example, India is having trade with US, India is having trade with European countries, India is having trade with other Asian countries as well. But the share of US, like share of India's trade with US, let's say higher than other countries. Okay, so we are assigning more weight to trade with respect to US. Okay, so when we say nominal, it's simply what? Weighted exchange rate, but inflation is not adjusted or price level is not adjusted. But when we say real, It is inflation adjusted or price level adjusted. Both are same, but the only difference you can say, in case of inflation, sorry, in case of nominal, inflation is not adjusted. But in case of real, inflation is adjusted. What is this inflation is adjusted? You consider the increase in price level while determining the exchange rate. Okay? So this is the difference. Coming to the next one, convertibility. If you see previous year question, you will find there are, I think thrice they have asked this concept, convertibility. In 15 they simply asked what is convertibility, and in other two times they simply put one statement in that particular question. So let's see what is this convertibility and all. The meaning of convertibility simply means exchange between two currencies without any restriction, or we can say exchange of two currencies at the market rate or without any restriction. That means exchange of Indian rupee against dollar at the market rate of exchange or at market exchange rate. That means when we say current account or current account convertibility, that means in terms of exchange of goods and services between two countries, let's say dollar and Indian rupee, there is no restriction by any external authority. Whatever would be the amount or whatever would be the trade volume, you can simply exchange against US dollar or foreign currency. But when we say there is some kind of restriction, let's say a cap on the trade volume, let's say on this particular item you have the exchange and in this particular item you can't exchange freely. This is what restriction or what we call the partial convertibility. So if you say in case of India, in current account we follow fuller current account convertibility, no restriction in terms of trade of goods and services. But in case of capital account, as far as investment borrowings are concerned, India follows partial capital account convertibility. That means some restrictions are there when you exchange Indian rupee into foreign currencies. Okay. You may ask, sir, what kind of exchange, what kind of restrictions? Restrictions could be like, if you want to send money somewhere, let's say, like your sibling is staying abroad, you want to send money. So government can simply put that this much amount of foreign currency you can send in a financial year. Let's say in the form of borrowing as well. This much of amount would be the cap or limit for a particular financial year that a company can borrow or company can raise fund from the external market. So these kind of restrictions government can put from time to time. When there is no such restriction, we call it fuller convertibility. When there is restriction on this, either in terms of uh, cap in terms of number or time duration, then we call it partial convertibility. So in capital account, we follow partial account convertibility. In the current account, we follow fuller convertibility.
Sir, this G7 nations decided to cap price of Russian oil.
Hmm.
Then what is it? Is it also
They decided to put a cap on the price of.
price of Russian oil?
So this is something uh, we can call it trade barrier. Okay, trade barrier simply means you want to restrict trade. Like we'll discuss, one is tariff, another one is non-tariff. Tariff means kind of tax which is imposed on either export or import of a particular product. That means the price of that product increases. If you see the non-tariff, that is quota, a volume of or what we call a quantity is fixed in terms of export and import. Okay, but when we say this convertibility, that means you are putting any restriction on the what we call this convert of one currency into another. Okay, here exchange rate is not taken into consideration. We are not talking about the exchange rate. We are talking about the whatever may be the exchange rate. We are discussing the conversion of one currency into another. If that is restricted, then that is partial account convertibility. So in capital account, we follow this partial one. We are not following the fuller. Now question is why India follows this partial capital account convertibility? Why not fuller?
It will impact foreign exchange reserve.
How? How it impacts the foreign exchange reserve?
There are some sectors
Hmm.
which are essential for the whole public, larger public,
Mm-hmm.
and government controls that sector, and which are very essential for public. जैसे कि government controls atomic energy, nuclear sectors,
Mm-hmm.
railways, and these are very kind of security, security integrity of the country.
Okay. What are those components under capital account? Investment, maybe direct or indirect, borrowing, and assistance. When we say investment, borrowing, and assistance, generally we can sense that these are large in volume or large in quantity. Yes or no? Investment, like in crores or lakh crores rupees. Yes or no? The amount of investment. So these are huge in volume. If there would not be any restriction on this, then what will happen? Anything happens, let's say in US, for example, in recent case, US simply increased the rate of interest on the government securities. So what happened? Investment suddenly went to US. That means investment is coming down your economy or investment withdrawal is the case. So this investment withdrawal, immediate inward investment, unlimited amount of borrowing, that leads to what? Excessive fluctuations in the domestic currency. So to prevent this excessive fluctuations, that government is deliberately attempting not to permit this fuller capital account convertibility. That means when excessive borrowing, excessive investment coming to your country or going outside, what will happen? Mismatch of demand for foreign currency and supply of foreign currency. Yes or no? Then fluctuation should be at a higher side. So to check that, government simply is maintaining this partial capital account convertibility. Although India has attempted twice to implement this fuller capital account convertibility, one in 1996, second in 2006. Okay, and both the case or both the time, this committee was formed, and the name of the committee was S.S. Tarapore, and the person who was the deputy governor of RBI, the committee was formed S.S. Tarapore. Both the times, this Tarapore committee recommended fuller capital account convertibility. Both the time, this recommended fuller capital account convertibility. But both the time, government could not implement this because of 96 it recommended, 97 Asian financial crisis, 2006 it recommended, 2008 to 10 subprime crisis in US. So government did not implement both the times. So still India is following this partial capital account convertibility. But you should simply remember, in current account it is the fuller, in capital account it is the partial. Tomorrow we'll see some previous year question with respect to this chapter, how questions are coming from this particular topic, convertibility. Okay. So any doubt on this convertibility, or it's clear? So why government has not yet adopted fuller convertibility in capital account? The reason is very basic or fundamental. Once you open your capital account or adopt the fuller convertibility, you will not be immune to any further like crisis or any kind of instability in the global economy. You simply, your exposure will be more. So anything happens in US certainly impacts in your economy, immediate withdrawal of investment, excessive depreciation of your currency. So government wants to regulate that in terms of this partial capital account convertibility. Okay. Yesterday we started this balance of payment. Who maintains that record of balance of payment in India? RBI maintains. So who maintains this foreign exchange reserve? RBI. Okay. Foreign exchange reserve is maintained by the RBI. Then what are those different components of foreign exchange reserve? What are those different components of foreign exchange reserve? Yes, one is gold. Second, bullion. What is that bullion? So one is gold, second one is foreign currency assets. What are those foreign currencies assets? Four foreign currencies. One is dollar, second is your pound, third is euro, and fourth is yen. Four currencies are there: dollar, pound, euro, and yen. Okay. And the third is SDRs, or what we call special drawing rights. And put a star mark on that SDR. And the fourth one is reserve position. Reserve position with IMF. Again put a star mark on this reserve position. These two will discuss when we'll discuss your IMF and World Bank. We'll discuss that as well, because last year also they asked this question, rapid financing instrument from the IMF itself, because it was in news due to this Sri Lanka and Ukraine crisis. So we'll discuss those two or twin institutions, IMF and World Bank. There I will explain this too, SDR and reserve position. Okay. So this is the four components through which RBI maintains its foreign exchange reserve. First one is gold, foreign currency assets, then SDR, and reserve position with IMF. And when we say foreign currency assets, it consists of four currencies: dollar, pound, euro, and yen. Okay. Next is barriers to trade, or trade barriers, we call it trade barriers. What is the meaning of this trade barriers? Simply creation of, or what we call the restriction over the free flow of trade, or free flow of goods and services. Okay. So what are those restrictions? Restrictions are divided into two parts. One is tariff, another one is non-tariff. Tariff is what? Simply a kind of tax. It's not a tax actually. It's a kind of tax which is which is imposed on the import or export of goods and services. That means it simply increases the price of the product. So let me repeat, it's not a tax actually. I am just saying it's a kind of tax which is imposed on the import and export of goods, which increases the price of the product. Let's see with the help of one example. Let's say the price of a product is 100 rupees. Okay, and the import cost is 100 rupees. Let's say you are importing a product at rupees 100. You imposed 10% import tariff. Then what would be the price? 110. So when the price or the product would be costlier, then obviously the demand will come down. Your import can be checked. So at the time of current account deficit, if you want to reduce the import, if you are not importing essential items, then you can simply use this tariff so that your import will come down. But if you import essential items, then it's difficult. Okay, this is one case. Second, how we use this for export. Let's say onion I think you must have seen at least once in a year, the price of onion reaches 100 in the domestic economy. So what government does? Government simply imposes tariff on the export. Why? Suppose initially India was exporting this onion at rupees 100 and government imposed 10% tariff. Now the new price would be 110. So when the price of onion increased in international market, obviously the demand will come down. The demand will come down and that exported onion would be available in your economy so that price can be controlled. Both the cases tariff is used. One import, another one is export. If you want to discourage export, then again you can use the tariff. Okay, if you want to discourage import, you can use the tariff, and in case of export also you can use the tariff. So tariff is something, a kind of tax which increases the price of the product. Clear? Now coming to this non-tariff. Non-tariff. There are multiple types of non-tariff. One is quota. The first one is quota. In case of tariff, what we do, we imposes or we simply increases the price of the product, either to discourage import or to discourage export. Clear? In case of quota, what we do, we put a quantitative restriction. We put quantitative restriction. For example, China or your Indian toy market is importing toys from China. Government decided that beyond, let's say, 500 crore rupees of toys, you can't import. That means you put restriction on the trade volume. Quantitative restriction. Let's say, for example, you can't export 50 tons, you can't export beyond 50 tons of onion. It's a what? Quantitative restriction. You are not tampering the price of the product. You are simply what? You are setting a quantity. You are putting a cap. You are putting a limit on the quantity of export or import. This is your quota or quantitative restriction. Clear? So both the case you can use, export and import. So if you see the agricultural products, your dairy products, fruits, vegetables, on those items we use this quota system, not the tariff. Okay. The next one is production subsidies. Next one is production subsidies. What is the meaning of this? Suppose rice is the, like India produces rice and India is in advantageous position. India wants to export or increase the export of rice. Okay. For example, the price of rice was 100. Okay. So let's say, for example, 500 or 500 ton of rice are imported from India at the rupees 100. If we reduce this to 90 or 80, what will happen? it will, the quantity of import will definitely increase, because for the cheaper price, if you want to provide the same quality at a lower price, definitely they will demand more. Yes or no? So what government does? Government provides subsidies in the production process. Example, raw materials, fertilizer, high yield varieties of seeds, okay, uh, instruments at a very subsidized rate. So they will ask those farmers, you reduce this price to 90, 80. So the rest amount government will provide to you. So you sell at a lesser price, so that India's export will increase. So then question is how it creates this barrier. It's a kind of discriminatory treatment. You are making your export more competitive than others. You are making your export more cheaper than others, so that your export could be increased. And this is something you are creating barrier for other countries' goods. Clear? So this is production subsidy. So agriculture sector generally gets these subsidies. Third,
सर इसी रीजन की वजह से अभी
WTO.
डब्ल्यूटीओ ने इंडिया को ये जो यूक्रेन एक्सपोर्ट करने की जो बात कर रहा था, यूक्रेन क्राइसिस,
प्रॉब्लम क्या है ना कि लाइक यूएस ऑल्सो प्रोवाइड सब्सिडीज, बट यूएस सिंपली प्रोवाइड सब्सिडीज इन टर्म्स ऑफ कैश, direct cash transfer. So there is no such record of providing subsidies. But India is providing subsidies through these products or this raw materials of agriculture, which is being recorded. Okay, so that's why India is like blamed by international bodies and all. Although India is defending, I think you have heard that peace clause and all. Will cover those things in the international institution section. Okay, so this is production subsidies, and the third one is export subsidy. Export subsidy, this production subsidy is something during the production. When we say export subsidy, government is providing subsidy at the export of a product. That means at the post production stage. Let's say for the export you need transport service. Suppose you want to send a consignment from India to US, you need what? Transportation facility. So that transportation facility, or the price of the transportation facility, will be beared by the government. So again, that reduces the cost or the price of that product. Again, that is further discriminatory against the other countries' goods and services. Okay, so this is at the post production stage. This is not at the production stage, rather post production stage. For example, transport subsidies or transportation. Okay, fourth is health, sanitary and safety grounds. Health, sanitary and safety grounds. Any example on this? Frequently it comes in newspaper.
कोविड के लिए मास्क एंड सैनिटाइजर की सब्सिडी पे मतलब कुछ रिस्ट्रिक्शंस लगाए जाके लोगों में एसेंशियल कमोडिटी बैंक।
See, in the dairy sector, when India exports milk, in European countries also are good at this milk production and all, because of this their climatic condition, Mediterranean region and all. Okay, so they try to put restriction on the import of milk from India. So what they do, they discriminate India's product against this only health, sanitary, and safety grounds. For example, the Alfonso mango, they claim that India uses pesticides which is beyond the health standard of European countries. So they reject the consignment. This is another form of what? Discrimination or discriminatory treatment. Okay, health, sanitary, and safety grounds. Another one is packaging requirement. Packaging requirement is what? Whatever product you want to send to a country, that particular country's guidelines should be issued to your country that this should be our packaging standard. If you can't meet, they will definitely reject your consignment. But what happens if you try to meet this packaging requirement or packaging standard? Sometimes this packaging cost is something higher than the price of the product. Definitely the price increases in the international market, so your good or the product you want to export is reduced in the international market, or your export is discouraged. Okay, clear? So these are the trade barriers, or what we call this protectionism, what we have discussed in the current account deficit part. Okay, tariff and non-tariff. Tariff means simply tries to increase the price so that export and imports are discouraged. The second one is quota, that means you put a quantitative restriction on that particular product. Then production subsidies, you are giving subsidies at the production stage. Export subsidy, that is given at the post production stage, for example transportation subsidy, and then health, sanitary, and safety grounds, and then the packaging requirements. So these are trade barriers or creates discrimination against the trade. Okay, any doubt? समझ में आ रहा है या थोड़ा थोड़ा? थोड़ा इसको रिवाइज करिए घर पे जाके, क्लास नोट्स प्लस ओटो हो जाएगा. यू हैव टू रिवाइज ए लॉट एक्चुअली. जितना आप रिवाइज करेंगे ना उतना वो प्रिंट होता जाएगा दिमाग में. Then the last part of this chapter is economic integration. The previous section are just we discussed what? Trade barrier or restriction. Here we are discussing economic integration, that means elimination of those restriction. Elimination of those restriction. The first type of this economic integration is known as what? preferential trade agreement. Preferential trade agreement. Preferential trade agreement, or what we call PTA. Okay, just see here. Suppose a PTA is signed between three countries. Let's say these are the three countries, A, B, and C. Okay, and with the consensus, they decided that the tariff policy they had earlier, they simply reduced it. Okay, suppose before this PTA, they had, let's say, 50% tariff on a particular product A. Now, with the consensus, all these three parties decided that let's reduce the tariff. Under what? Preferential trade agreement. Simply they can reduce it. Or they can set different tariff policy for separate goods. Let's say total 100 items they are trading with each other, and they decided that 60 items will have this much amount of trade, 40 items will have this much amount of trade. So basically they simply reduce the tariff. But this is the third party, and A is having trade with D, B is having trade with D, and C is having also trade with D. When they individually trade with country D or the third party, they will have separate or independent tariff policy. Separate or independent tariff policy. The relationship between B and D does not decide or does not determine or does not affect the trade between A and D. They will have independent one. This is known as what? PTA, Preferential Trade Agreement. The next is Free Trade Agreement or FTA. What happens under FTA? Let's see. Suppose these are the whole like basket of goods. These three countries are having trade with each other. Okay? On this particular goods, this part, let's say 60 items in this trade basket, they decided to eliminate any barrier or zero tariff, eliminate those tariff. But in this part, they simply decided to reduce the tariff. Here simply what they did, they reduced the tariff. Here they are having what? Few goods, there is no tariff or zero tariff. Few goods, they simply reduce the tariff. And with respect to third party, let's say D, they will have independent tariff policy like the PTA. So can we say FTA is a higher version of PTA? Or in case of FTA, there is more economic integration? Yes or no? Because here, at least on some goods, you are eliminating completely those tariff and all, or tariff barriers. Okay? Next is custom union. Custom union. What happens in custom union? Let's see. Custom union, in case of custom union, those member countries, they simply eliminate tariff on goods and services they are having trade with each other. With respect to third party, D, common tariff policy. PTA and FTA, independent tariff policy with respect to third party. But in case of this, common tariff policy. That means with consensus, they decided when we, let's say, countries from European Union, when they decided we will have trade with each other, then there is no such tariff and all. But when we have trade with India, then like commonly or with consensus of all members, who will decide what will be the rate of tariff. Okay. Again, this is something higher version of FTA or higher version of economic integration than FTA.
So when we talk about India UK
Hmm.
trade agreement
Hmm.
that is going
Hmm.
on,
Hmm.
so is it comes under custom union?
No, this is bilateral one. See, from last 10 years, in fact, India is trying to have, or both India and European Union is having, or they are trying to have a free trade agreement, which is still at the negotiation stage. In 2021, in January, in the month of January, officially UK, that Brexit process completed. Clear? UK came out from that European Union. So just after 1 year, in January 2022, they decided to have a FTA with India. UK decided that because earlier they were part of this European Union, then there was no such separate FTA as such. Now, since they already had left that group, now they are having, this UK is trying to have a FTA with India separately, that is bilateral FTA. Okay, that is still at the negotiation stage. Diwali was this year Diwali was the deadline. They said, but they could not meet that. So this is at the negotiation stage.
It comes under FTA only.
FTA only. Custom union. The solid example is European Union. No tariff on those goods and services between those countries of European Union. Okay. See, along with this zero tariff or elimination of tariff on goods and services, if there is free movement of capital and labor, that means custom union plus free movement of capital and labor, that is known as what? Common market. So inside the European Union, you no need of any visa or passport to move from one country to another. So custom union plus free movement of capital and labor, that is known as common market. This is something again higher version of what? Economic integration of custom union. Okay, common market. Then come to the last one. The last, this is again for European Union. You can say European Union is a common market. So European Union is a solid example for this common market and all. Because along with this zero tariff policy of goods and services, again they have free movement of capital and labor. What is this free movement of capital? Investment and borrowing and all. Okay, labor simply workforce. Okay, now CU custom union plus common market plus CU plus common market plus harmonized harmonized monetary and fiscal policy plus common currency, and this is known as what? Economic and monetary union. Economic and monetary union. Okay, again यूरोपियन यूनियन इज द एग्जाम्पल. यूरो जोन जिसको हम लोग बोलते हैं, यूरो इज द कॉमन करेंसी. यूरोपियन पार्लियामेंट, यूरोपियन सेंट्रल बैंक इज अगेन समथिंग the common central bank, although they have their own currency and as well as their own central bank of every different countries, but still they have a common central bank and common currency. ठीक है. So if you draw this, the first one was PTA, the second one was FTA, the third one was custom union, the fourth one was common market, the fifth one was economic monetary union. This is the graph of economic integration. Okay, so this is all about your external sector. International institutions we will deal with a separate class. IMF, World Bank, and few concepts related to WTO. Okay. If you have anything to ask, you can ask. So we discuss money and banking, and then we discuss this balance of payment chapter, external sector, what we call. And the next chapter is what? Fiscal policy or fiscal development. The budget and all. Okay. When we say fiscal development, monetary policy, we saw that the policy which is executed by the RBI, Reserve Bank of India, in our country. When we say fiscal policy, that is simply the policy which is executed by the government. So let's see what are those policies. Athar, please hold on for a few minutes. From 12 onwards, we'll discuss those doubts. Tarus, please focus on the current topic. We'll come to that, whatever doubt you have. Don't worry. Okay. So, what are those functions of government first? Functions of government. The first function is allocation. The second function is distribution. The third function is economic growth. And the fourth function is stabilization. Allocation, distribution, economic growth, and stabilization. These four functions are by the government only. So, if you see the history of a state or the evolution of a state, then you will find that initially state was considered, or those thinkers, they were saying state must be a police state, or the role of maintenance of law and order. Gradually it evolved into this police state becomes the welfare state. It should take care of those deprived sections of the society. Yes or no? So the concept of state has been evolved. If you have sociology optional PSIR, so you get to know about the nature of state and all. So these are the functions of a state or the government. Why these functions or these functions are being done by the government? What are the objectives of this fiscal policy or this functions what we just wrote in the last section? I mean, why these four are executed by the government, or objectives of fiscal policy, you can say. The first one is, if a government is a welfare government, to achieve those goals, let's say allocation and distribution and all, we'll although discuss that allocation, distribution and all, to achieve those goals or the welfare motive, government needs what? Fund. Government needs fund. What is the source of government fund? Tax. Taxes and non-tax revenue. Yes and no? Taxes and non-tax revenue. This is one source. So fund it requires. Second, the resources it has to maintain. The resources it has to maintain. The question is, why resources it has to maintain, or why this taxes or the revenue part it requires? Because it spend money through this public expenditure to achieve that objective of what? Welfare state. Simply the distribution means what? Distribution of goods and services. For example, in those ration store, food grains are available at a subsidized rate. So this is what part of distribution of your resources from one to another. Who are giving the tax? Those taxpayers, those who are capable to give the tax, those who have the capacity to give the tax. And by collecting those tax, government is simply spending for the welfare of the people. So you can say government is again something doing resource mobilization from one end to another. Yes and no. So this is the role of the government, what we call. Okay. Now, if you see the present time, you will not find this term fiscal policy is used by the any government. What we generally see, the budget. I mean, technically, this fiscal policy is not there in the any policy book or something. We call it because it's theoretical in nature. But practically, if you see, this is the budget through which government executes its power and all through this. What is that tax and that public expenditure? Because we will discuss that the different segments of this budget and all revenue, receipts and expenditure, those types and all, we'll discuss that. So budget is that which through which, or budget is that instrument through which government executes its fiscal policy. So let's see few basic things about the budget. Is it there in the constitution? No. What is that in the constitution?
Annual financial
Financial statement under article 112, annual financial statement. 1110 refers to what? Money bill. Okay. So budget word is not there. It was asked by UPSC also ki budget word is there or not. So there is no such word in the constitution called budget. It is annual financial statement as per the article 112. So what is this budget? It's a statement. In case of balance of payment, what we have seen, it's a record of transaction of goods and services of a country with rest of the world. So what is this budget? It's a statement. It's a statement. It's statement of what? The receipt or a revenue or income, you can say, and expenditure. Okay. What is the duration of financial year?
first April to 21st March.
1st April to
21st March.
March. When this budget is produced?
First February, but right now from 2017 onwards, I think first of February.
Either last working day of January or whatever may be the working day, or first working day of February. Earlier it was
First March. First of
28th, last of
last of Feb or first of March, whatever may be the working day. They simply preponed this by 1 month from 2017 onwards. Why they have preponed this? Sorry?
to decide allocation of money prior to
Yeah,
the election.
that to vote on grants and
What is Bhutan account? What is Bhutan account? This is true. Like before this financial year starts, all those money would be dispersed to respective departments because it takes time and you need discussion. When budget is introduced, then it is distributed among the like members. Then there is leave of parliament. I mean, simply leave for 1.5 months. Then they would study at that and they will come to parliament and discuss that. But what is that vote on account? Okay.
for the time being that
Hmm.
expenditure, government needs expenditure for the time being while this budget process is going on.
Yes. Earlier, what happens when this your budget has not been passed by parliament, but still your financial year starts or begins. Okay, so for that 1.5 months or 2 months, you need what fund? For that temporary arrangement, the parliament or the government has to pass that vote on account by the parliament. So every time you have to do that. To avoid that vote on account, we have just simply preponed this so that by the time your financial year ends, your budget has already been passed by the parliament and it would be, the fund would be disbursed to the different ministries or departments and all. Okay, this was the idea behind this 2017. Anyway, we'll continue this from tomorrow onwards. Okay, so let me give you a brief recap whatever we discussed. We discussed this the comparison between flexible and fixed exchange rate, and then we discussed the devaluation and revaluation, what are the impacts, and then current account deficit we discussed its impact and solution, and then we discussed your sterilization. Okay, and then we discussed the convertibility, and then we discussed the trade barrier and economic integration, and finally we started fiscal policy. We'll continue tomorrow this fiscal policy. Okay, international institution we'll discuss in a separate class. Okay, so let me answer questions of my online students. Mahima, I have already told you difference between unlisted and listed means. Unlisted means companies are not there in the stock market, or they have not registered them in the stock market. That is unlisted. Listed means they have the companies, those who have registered themselves in the stock market. BD, is MSS also sterilize the inflationary impact? Yes, marginal, sorry, your market stabilization scheme is used for this to control the inflation or price regulation. The sterilization is something part of the market stabilization scheme. It's simply to stabilize the market. Okay. If domestic currency devalued, foreign currency will be revalued, then how the purchasing power of someone living abroad would decrease? If the person who is living abroad is getting money from your economy, that means suppose one of your sibling is staying abroad and your father is sending money to your sibling. So by the devaluation process, for the same amount of foreign currency, you have to send more money. Or if you send the same or same quantity of money in form of domestic currency, your sibling would get lesser amount of foreign currency. That means what? Your siblings' purchasing power would be affected. Mahima, I have already told you that this currency swap is something which is used to stabilize the currency, but this is something is not the prime measures, or primarily government or central bank does not do that, because it's a kind of temporary arrangement. We have seen this currency swap in case of India and Russia, India, Iran, in fact. I mean, this currency swap is something which is having a very less percentage with respect to the uh, use of foreign currencies in trade. So that's why, although it could be a measure to rectify that problem, but you can't use it frequently. Okay, Tarus, near and rear I have already told you. Near means the nominal effective exchange rate. Here also, suppose India is having trade with different countries, let's say US, China, and let's say Russia. Okay, and let's say US and India is having more trade volume than China, India and Russia. What is the meaning of this? Under this near, what we do, we generally assign weight as per the trade volume. So if we assign weight, then India US trade is having more weight than the India China and India Russia. This is number one. Number two, this NEER, or this nominal effective exchange rate, is not inflation adjusted. That means we do not consider the price level while we decide this near. But when we say rear, this is again something weighted one, but this is inflation adjusted. That's why this real term is used. Let me tell you this difference. In fact, if you study the national income also, one is nominal and another one is real, the basic concept of economics. Nominal means in terms of price level. Real means in terms of real goods and services. Let me give you that example. When we say nominal, this is denominated in terms of price level. That means suppose 20 units of goods are produced and every unit the price is rupees 10. So the total amount is what? 200. This is the nominal amount, because we are converting this 20 goods and services in terms of price. And what is this real? This 20 amount, because this is in terms of goods and services. So in that rear and near, in case of rear, we adjust inflation or we consider price level while we decide the exchange rate. But in case of near, we do not consider the price level. Okay. Mahima, these are the exchange rate which are used by the country while having trade with other countries to know the trade volume. Okay, to know the trade volume or those basket of goods and services in terms of exchange rate. That is the use. Same. That question was asked in 2016. The recent addition in SDR. There is a difference actually in terms of SDR and in terms of India's foreign currency. Indian foreign currency consists of 4 currencies, but in the IMF SDR it is 5. Yes. Okay. Tarus, please see here. Non-tariff and custom union. Okay. Non-tariff simply means barriers other than the tariff. simply known as the non-tariff. In case of tariff, what we saw, we simply change the price of a product. That is the tariff one. Under this non-tariff, we do not change the price. We simply try to put restriction other than the price of that particular product. So non-tariff, one such non-tariff I told you, the quota. That means we are putting a quantitative restriction to create trade discrimination. In case of tariff, what we do, we simply increase the price so that export and import will be controlled or will be reduced. But in case of this quota, we set quantitative restriction. Let's say India is exporting basmati rice, and India, the government decided not to change the price of basmati rice, rather it set a quantity. Let's say 5 ton of basmati rice only can be exported outside, not beyond that. So this is what non-tariff. This is the part of non-tariff, or what we call the quota. Similarly, non-tariff policies like I have already told you, production subsidies. Similarly, the other one is export subsidies. The subsidies which is given at the post-production stage. Okay. So again, these are creating what? Barrier, discriminatory trade policy. Other than this, I have already told you, let's say those health and safety grounds, I have given the example. Let's say Alfonso mango, I have given the example. Dairy sector also, the milk India was exporting to European Union, that also is another example. So these are what? Non-tariff barriers. Okay, custom union. Custom union simply means group of countries, for example, European Union, group of countries, they simply, let's say 4 countries are there, for example, A, B, C, D. They decided that no tariff on those goods and services. This is custom union, no tariff. That means if B wants to export A wants to export to C, D wants to export to A, D wants to export to C, there is no tariff on those export and import of goods and services. Author of this excise duty is something different, but yes, custom duty which we use, that is under this tariff policy only. Trade barrier or tariff policy. Excise duty is something different. Tarus, I explained just quota, the quantitative restriction. Okay, sterilization, let me explain. Sterilization simply means you can just wait 5 or 10 minutes. Sterilization simply means, I have already told you yesterday that when this extra supply of dollar is coming to your economy, RBI absorbing that extra supply against Indian rupee. That means by giving Indian rupee, RBI absorbing additional dollar from the economy. When this additional rupee is supplied to the economy, that creates inflation, what we call, or increase in price level. Now the challenge is to control this inflation because it negatively impacts different sections of the society. Then RBI, what RBI does to control this inflation, RBI uses that reverse repo rate. Reverse repo, because under repo we have seen commercial banks borrow from RBI. Under reverse repo we have seen RBI borrows money from the commercial banks. So when RBI borrows money from the commercial banks, money supply could be reduced. So this is the method which RBI uses, number one. Number two, I have already told you that suppose RBI wants to absorb this extra dollar, but RBI does not have this rupee. So what RBI does, RBI has to print this currency or Indian rupee to supply into the economy against the dollar. So that additional printing of Indian rupee would cause money supply or increase in money supply. Again, that leads to inflation in the economy. So further to control that inflation, the same reverse repo will be used by the RBI. This is known as the process of sterilization. That means to control inflation in the economy by the RBI or by the monetary policy instrument, this is known as sterilization. In case of depreciation of domestic currency, how does absorption of rupee will help in control of excessive depreciation? Okay. In case of depreciation of domestic currency, fine. Indian rupee is depreciating. Okay. Indian rupee is depreciating. How does absorption of rupee will help in controlling excessive depreciation? When you are absorbing Indian rupee, that means you are supplying what? Dollar. Supplying dollar. When supply of dollar will increase, the price of dollar will come down. The price of dollar will come down. I have already told you, supply remains constant. When demand increases, price increases. Demand remaining constant, when supply increases, price come down. So when supply of dollar would increase, price will come down. So dollar would depreciate and price or Indian rupee will appreciate, so that you can control this depreciating Indian rupee. Atharv, yes, those production linked incentive schemes, these are kind of subsidies government is giving to those companies. Okay. Mahima, see, this FDI comes in the unlisted companies, because generally what happens, those are listed companies in the stock market. If any investment comes, that is in the form of what? FPI or portfolio investment. Okay.
So there is listed companies also like FDI.
Yes. See, FDI is coming in the listed companies also, but that is in terms of physical infrastructure or something. When we say the listed or unlisted, that is referring to the stock market. Okay, that is what. Gurubir, I will call you now after a few minutes. We'll discuss whatever problem you have. It will be sorted soon. Atharv, this trade agreements like SEPA and SESA, or what we call this CEPA or CECA, those agreements are part of this FTA only. Okay. I mean, these are different modern forms of FTA, but the umbrella term is FTA for these kind of agreements. Gurveer, I have explained this multiple times, so I will explain it. I will call you back after a few minutes. We'll take those doubts. Okay. Yes, MSP is part of that subsidy only, because you are giving a minimum price to the farmer. That is a part of subsidy. Aviral, I have just told you this comprehensive economic partnership agreement or comprehensive economic cooperation agreement, it's a part of FTA only. Okay. Oh, this I have to explain again. Okay. Okay, Tarus, let me explain that. See, let's say these three countries, they enter into PTA and they decided that those tariff will come down, reduce the tariff. The second stage is FTA. They simply did what? Some goods they simply eliminated tariff, and in some they reduced the tariff. With respect to the third party, they have the same tariff policy, PT and FTA. They will decide their independent tariff policy. Okay. Now, third one, custom union. Custom union, I have told you, suppose 3 countries are there or 4 countries are there, zero tariff policy in case of goods and services. And when they decide tariff policy with respect to the third party, then common tariff policy, no independent tariff policy, rather common tariff policy. This is custom union. Now come to the next stage, that is your common market. Along with the custom union, if there is free flow of, no barrier in the flow of what? Labor and capital, then that is known as common market. Okay. Then CU, custom union, plus CM, common market, plus harmonized economic and monetary policy. That means single central bank, single currency. Okay, then we call it what? Economic and monetary union. That means I have explained that. You just see this graph. If you see or if you compare these 5 in form of economic integration, the economic integration increases from PTA to FTA, from FTA to custom union to common market to economic and monetary union. Function of government and stabilization of fiscal policy, it is done by the government only. It's not by the RBI. When we say RBI, it's monetary policy. When we say the fiscal policy, it is done by the government. So function of the government is what we call the fiscal policy. Okay. See, when the repo rate will increase, obviously it reduces the money supply in the economy. Simultaneously, when the repo rate increases, that means this rate of interest in the government securities also increases. Now, this is something safe or attracts investment. When investment will come to your economy, then demand for rupee will increase. When demand for rupee will increase, price of rupee will increase. That means it will appreciate domestic currency and depreciate the foreign currency. In that help, we can control this excessive depreciation. Okay. Still, if you have any doubt, then I have given you my number. Again, I am writing this. You can simply call me. Okay. So thank you. We'll continue tomorrow at the same time. Thank you, everyone.